And we're joined now on Balance of Power by Douglas Holtz-Eakin, the president of the American Action Forum. Thanks for being with us, Douglas. I wonder, as you look across the fall, this is the period of time in which everyone was supposed to be coming back to work. We were told to wait until Labor Day. We just got a very disappointing number for August. There are concerns that COVID and Hurricane Ida could continue to weigh on the job market. Are you giving up on workers coming back this fall?
Oh, not at all. I think if you look at this report, we see something very familiar, which is that the economy follows the path of the coronavirus. And with the rise in the cases from the Delta variant, we're seeing some negative impacts. But it doesn't hit everyone equally. The real hole in this report is leisure and hospitality, which had exactly 0 new jobs created after averaging about 300,000 for months. If you put those numbers back in, the overall top line looks pretty good. And some other indicators are very good. The household report showed 500,000 jobs created. Unemployment rate fell for the right reasons, people getting jobs. Wages rose at a nearly 7% annual rate. And if you look at the combination of wages, hours, and employees, the demand for labor, payrolls, is up at over 9% in this report. So that's a very tight, hot labor market out there outside of leisure and hospitality.
Douglas, you were director of the CBO when you conducted a study on taxes, and we're in the process now of having this conversation against the backdrop of a big debate over potentially hiking taxes on the wealthy. You found in a study on tax rates that sometimes tax cuts were more expensive, and I wonder if you support some of the tax hikes that Democrats are pushing right now in Washington.
Well, I think you can make a good case that we can use more revenue in the years to come. We have an enormous fiscal problem that's really not being talked about enough. We just learned that the expiration dates for Social Security and Medicare have moved up yet again, and no one has proposals to solve those. So there might be the need for more revenue, but there are better and worse ways to raise revenue. Broadening the base is a good idea. Raising rates dramatically, not usually very successful. So I worry, for example, about the notion that we're going to jack up the top corporate rate again. We lost about 100 headquarters in the 10 years leading up to the 2017 law. There is no reason to go back to fighting over these firms relocating outside of the United States. That's the wrong way to go on tax policy.
There's like a kitchen sink almost approach right now in the menu of what could be possible for these taxes. What do you think will actually make it into the final legislation?
Oh, your guess is as good as mine. But I think if you look at that kitchen sink, there's a theme there, which is let's figure out who we're going to tax. We're going to get people with big IRAs, or we're going to go get people who have carried interest, or we're going to go get people who have high wealth or top 1%. So it's an attempt to tax people. Unfortunately, that's not how the economy works. You tax economic activity. If you tax the accumulation of risk capital and the allocation of that capital, you will diminish productivity growth and ultimately hurt the middle class, the workers. So thinking more carefully about the broad economic implications of those taxes would be a real step forward instead of just trying to personalize it and go attack people using the tax code.
Trying to look at the jobs number today, as well as this fight within the Democratic Party about infrastructure, does a jobs number like this that is pretty weak, and you see that the recovery is still happening, we're not out of it yet in terms of the Delta variant, does this help or hurt the likes of Senator Joe Manchin, who said we should wait to spend until there is another crisis? But aren't we still in a crisis?
We certainly have not recovered from the pandemic recession. There's no question about that. The crisis is really a public health crisis. It is about learning to operate the economy in the face of the coronavirus. It's not going to go away overnight. We should be prepared to see this persist for another year, perhaps, maybe longer. So how are we going to operate the economy in the presence of the coronavirus? And in particular, how are we going to address the supply constraints that are really the problem in the economy? Labor force participation is still well below what it was when the pandemic hit. Even if you put back to work the 1.5 million people who say they're staying home because of the virus, we'd still be below where we were. That's the key issue. And the proposals on the table are all things that are likely to diminish work. If you start giving people a check every month called the child tax credit, but it's really just a check, that diminishes incentives to work. And if you give them free health insurance, it diminishes the incentive to go get a job to get health insurance. So I would be concerned not just about the scale of the proposals, which are well beyond anything that's necessary, but also the kinds of things that are being proposed.
Well, so then, Douglas, will the expiration of enhanced unemployment benefits in itself bring people back to work?
It will contribute. I think there's no question that the existing literature shows that in a normal labor market, we're not quite there yet, but in a normal labor market, high replacement rates, replacing a big fraction of their normal wages with unemployment insurance, lengthen spells of unemployment and raise the rate. These replacement rates are over 100% in many cases. So there's no question having that go away is going to be a contributing factor. Some statistical research my colleagues have done suggests the same thing, but it's not the only thing. We know it's the virus itself. We know it's childcare arrangements, schools. It's going to take a combination of things to get things back to normal.
You advised President George H.W. Bush on the economy. If you were in this White House right now talking to Joe Biden, would you be revising your forecast for growth the next few months, Douglas, with your eye on the Delta variant?
I would. We've seen this pattern now multiple times. A sharp increase in cases, diminishment in the pace of economic growth, the pace in particular of job creation and wage growth. And so I'd be concerned about that. It's a reminder that the best economic policy right now remains public health policy, the combination of prevention and vaccines, mass social distancing, effective testing to identify outbreaks, and therapies for those who get sick. We have excellent therapies, and it's a mistake to put all the focus just on vaccines. We have lots of tools at the disposal. They should all be in use.
There's been a number of signals that the White House seems more concerned with inflation than they let on. How concerned are you about inflation? I just looked to what they're doing yesterday, which is tapping the SPR, which of course is because of Louisiana, but there's been letters about this. They do seem concerned about rising consumer prices.
They are concerned, and they should be. I wasn't concerned initially. I thought, for example, the American Rescue Plan, the $1.9 trillion in stimulus in March, was completely unnecessary. We had just done nearly $1 trillion in December. And if you look at the data, we were growing at 6.5 in the first quarter. We were growing at 6.5 in the second quarter. It didn't move the needle on growth, but it sure moved the needle on inflation. And I thought that would be largely transitory. But two things have happened that I think raise concern. Number one, inflation expectations have started to drift up. They aren't locked in at their previous levels. And we're seeing wage inflation. And you can't get a real permanent inflation picture unless you have both wage and price inflation. But that's happening now. And so I think there is more cause for concern.
Thanks again to Douglas Holtz-Eakin, American Action Forum president, for spending some time with us sharing insights on Balance of Power.